Hey everybody, my name is Andre. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Lyme disease or Lyme neuroborreliosis. Um, it is a pretty crazy disease. Well, first of all, Lyme neuroborreliosis is a term used to describe the nervous system disorders caused by the tick-borne spiral-shaped bacteria Borrelia burgdorferi and Borrelia asfeli. Untreated infections by Borrelia bacteria can result in meningeal and spinal root inflammation, lymphocytic invasion of the cerebral spinal fluid, and atrophy and fibrosis of the skin and nerves. So, why did I choose this topic? Well, I have a childhood friend who actually had Lyme disease and he was treated with antibiotics and was able to beat that thing. And the other day, I was listening to a podcast, and this guy came on. And he was talking about how he had Lyme disease and how he didn't get it treated for about like 3 years. So the virus was just pretty much going around in his nervous system and causing inflammation. And one day, he was in traffic, and he all of a sudden got a bout of confusion. And he had gotten these before in the past. Went to the doctor. Doctor told him it was related to the Lyme disease. And so he was in traffic one day and he totally just forgets how to drive. He's behind a traffic light. The light turns green. Cars are behind him honking. He forgets how to drive. So you can see why it's a pretty dangerous disease. So let's talk about why it's so dangerous. Um, to do that, we got to talk about the pathogenesis. The Ixodes tick feeds on infected animals that have that Borrelia bacteria in it. Those spiral bacteria replicate within the gut of the tick and they migrate to the salivary glands of the tick. From there, when that tick bites a human that's, out camping or whatever, they transfer those spirochetes, is what they call them, the little spiral-shaped Borrelia bacteria, transfer those things into the dermis of, somebody, unfortunate soul who's out there. And that results in a immune response. We get some white blood cells moving into the area. We get some inflammation, some vasodilation. The capillaries start to expand. There's more blood flow, and we get a characteristic erythema migrans, which is a bullseye-shaped rash on the site of the bite. It usually appears about 1 to 2 weeks later, and in some people it doesn't ever appear. So you can go a pretty long time without realizing that you have Lyme disease. And that bacteria, the Borrelia bacteria, can spread through your blood and can cause other types of systemic symptoms like the Borrelial lymphocytoma, which is a big mass of B cells. Um, and you see that here in that second picture. So, continuing on the pathogenesis, chronic T cell mediated immune reactions to Borrelia, essentially just chronic inflammation, results in a condition called acrodermatitis chronica atrophicaans, or ACA. It's that top picture that you see there. And so essentially it's a bluish reddish discoloration of the hands, or it's usually in the hands and the feet, but it can be anywhere along the skin, and it's essentially happening anywhere that there is skin. The mechanism is here. Essentially, Borrelia attacks extracellular matrix and connective tissue proteins by potentially binding to them and then attracting proteases. And then all of this leads to fibrosis and atrophy. And so you start to see discoloration in the hands, and over time, your hands can sort of lose feeling because that fibrosis is happening to nerves in your hands. And that inflammation and that fibrosis can also affect the cranial nerves. Let's say you get bit in the back of the head, or some people can get bit, or wherever. So let's say you get bit in the back of the head. That virus, or not the virus, that bacteria can spread around a cranial nerve, cause inflammation around the cranial nerves, and it results in this condition in 50% of people with Lyme disease, called uni or bilateral palsy, which is paralysis of pretty much half or both sides of the face. And that's the picture on the bottom here. The picture on the left is her before she got treated for it, and on the right is she got treated for it. But other complications with the Borrelia bacteria is that, let's say you get bit and it spreads into your spinal cord, you can get infiltration of the meninges, and that causes meningitis. This is apparently very common in children who get bit by ticks. And I couldn't find the mechanism for that, but yeah, essentially lymphocytes invade the cerebral spinal fluid. There's a lot of inflammation in the meninges. Another consequence of the Borrelia bacteria migrating around in the spine is that it can invade the cerebral spinal fluid, and then that can cause inflammation in the brain, and that results in encephalitis that can be very dangerous for your brain tissue. And another complication is post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. Essentially, the only treatment for Lyme disease is antibiotics, and it works really well. But sometimes, if you catch the bacteria too late, it can leave long-lasting, sometimes permanent symptoms like chronic neuropathy, cognitive impairment, especially if that bacteria was anywhere around your cranial nerves or in your head. So, and fatigue, yeah, essentially just slows your nervous system down. And to evaluate for them inside of a hospital, let's say, we're going to be doing serologic testing. We're going to be testing the plasma, doing ELISA assays for Borrelia IgG and IgM antibodies. We're going to be doing skin biopsies, and then we're also going to be doing cultures, blood cultures, and stuff like that in order to see if we can culture the Borrelia DNA or Borrelia bacteria, and then we can isolate the DNA with PCR. And as I mentioned earlier, the only treatment, and honestly, it's really effective, is antibiotics. These are 4 antibiotics that are listed to be very effective against the Borrelia bacteria. Some research techniques that we do some nerve biopsies, take a look at the nerves after the bacteria has, caused chronic inflammation in the area and, caused long-lasting effects. So we look at autopsies of people because of a very common problem called Lyme carditis, which is when the bacteria gets into the heart, causes inflammation, and that inflammation blocks off an electrical pathway within the heart, and it prevents the heart from pumping. And so that's that first picture, is what that shows. And then we also talk about using nerve conduction studies, which is essentially a device that has 2 electrodes. You hook an electrode up at the top of a nerve. That electrode fires an impulse and stimulates that nerve so that it sends an impulse down the axon. And then the bottom electrode is at the bottom, and it records how long it takes for that signal to reach it. And that gives you essentially a velocity. And if your velocity isn't within a normal range, it can be indicative that you have nerve damage. And so, yeah, that is Lyme disease. It's something I feel like it's not really talked about much, but ticks are definitely very dangerous here in the DC area. And I think it's important to talk about because a lot of times those symptoms like the bullseye, rash, and the hands, they don't show up for every single person. So you could be affected by this disease for a long time and not even know it. So yeah, thank you for listening.